He had 4 interceptions, one touchdown, and the 45-14 loss. Eli Manning looked like the Eli of old, 2 Super Bowls. He had 5 total touchdowns, 4 passing, and 1 of which he ran in. Washington looked lost as Kirk Cousins tried to find his way.
I was trying to get everything back in one play, and you can't do that. That's not the way it's going to come back. So I was starting to force things and trying to do too much, and just didn't stay true to my reads and stay patient. So, you know, I'm going to learn from it, but you know, not a good outing tonight.
Definitely not a good outing tonight. Stephen A., you said you were upset about what you had to witness in the nation's capital. What did you learn from what you witnessed in the nation's capital?
Well, we learned 2 things, Skip Bayless. Number 1, there is no quarterback controversy in the nation's capital. This is RG3's team, which brings me to point number 2. Kirk Cousins, say this for him. He's no liar. I can tell you that much. He sat there and he continuously told us he's a backup quarterback. He continuously told us this is RG3's team. He's continuously told us he's just here trying to hold down the fort until he's ready to hand back the reins. And we thought that he was just being PC, just politically correct, making sure that he didn't ruffle any feathers or give it or provide any kind of headline or bulletin board material, when in actuality, Kirk Cousins should be applauded for being one of the most honest people we have seen in American history when it comes to a football player, because he did not lie one bit. He was god-awful. I can't put into words how epically bad he was. 4 interceptions, 3 interceptions in the 3rd quarter. Skip Bayless, I don't know if I've ever seen that before, to be quite honest with you. I know they've got some stats going back to the 70s or whatever. I don't know if I've ever seen that, okay? He was just that awful. You had giant defenders literally sitting there waiting for his passes to come to them as if they were receivers. And then on top of it all, half the time, the receivers didn't even have their heads turned. They weren't even running the wrong route. He was just letting go of the ball prematurely. He was overthrowing. He was underthrowing. And most of the time, he was throwing it to the opposite team. And more importantly than anything else, Skip Bayless, look at his body language. The guy had his head down all the time, looked depressed. Players were scattering away from him like they were cockroaches running to some other piece of food or whatever the case may be. Any place where Kirk Cousins wasn't, that's where they were going. They almost wanted nothing to do with him, and I can't say that I blamed them. He was awful. And I know that it's just one game, but the epic fashion in which he lost, the way that he performed last night, it was just so bad, it's hard to put into words. He's one of those guys that, you know what, when things are going relatively decent, he's good to go. But when you put him in any kind of hole, and they put him in a hole by forcing a turnover, forcing him to fumble inside his own 30-yard line to lead to the Giants' first score, when that happened, from that moment on, he folded like a cheap tent. He wasn't alone. Please don't get me wrong. Haslett needs to be worried about his job. They're just awful on defense. There's no question about that. You look at some of the things that they do. What with Donald, the tight end, with his 3 touchdown having self, by the way, 3 touchdowns by a tight end. Was that first time since 1962? It's just unbelievable. But how is it that you have him on the right side, Skip, and you've got some dude 5'8" on him, and he's about 6'6"? I just don't understand that. I don't know what Haslett was thinking. In the end, I just look at it. This team got penalties on extra points, okay? They couldn't do anything right. And it's just a bad team right now. Gruden looks bad. Haslett looks even worse. But nobody, I repeat, nobody looked worse than Kirk Cousins. And oh, by the way, when you really, really look at it, Pierre Garçon, okay, and Halou Jr., and I forgot who else. They had 5, they combined for 5 tackles. Skip Bayless, they're on offense, but they had 5 tackles. I mean, it's just horrible. Just horrible. It really was that bad. Just was.
So, what do you want me to say?
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Get out of here.
I guess I could say, you know, maybe Robert Griffin III has a job waiting for him when he returns after all. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll actually get his job back. I don't know. And maybe we'll have to wait another 10 days or so for the Kirk Cousins era to officially begin, because I don't think it started last night, because I never thought it had started before. And it did get so bad late in that game, I waited for the home team to take Cousins out of the game and put their aunts and their uncles in. That's how bad he was. Just put your aunts and uncles in for your cousins, right? Because that's all you got. It was that bad. Am I right? Was it not? He described it for you. He's throwing balls to the other teams. Just put your aunts and uncles in Washington, because that's all you got.
That's not.
But it's true. That's how bad that game was. Okay. Yeah. Back to serious business here.
Okay. That was funny. That was funny, boy. That was a good one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was off the top of my head. Okay. I tried, because I love you so much. I tried to warn you yesterday. You should have been true blue. You should have picked your Giants, because they were really impressive against a Houston team that had been impressive in its first 2 games. I know Ryan Fitzpatrick turned back into Ryan Fitzpatrick. But without D'Angelo Hall in that Redskins secondary, I figured Eli just might eat him up, and did he ever? That was pretty good Eli.
Yeah.
That was pretty great Eli last night. And I have tried to tell you several times, I think your Giants defense is, dare I say, underrated. And last night they did not have Beeson, and then they lost DRC fairly early in that game.
They did.
And they're still pretty good. They got a little heat on Cousins, and even when they didn't, they cover pretty well. I think it's a pretty good defense that doesn't get enough adulation. So, in the end, I'm going to say it again. I've said this from the start. Kirk Cousins is not a starting quarterback in the National Football League. God help us. He is definitely not a franchise quarterback. And I also tried to warn you that last year he got his 3 starts at the end of the year, and he was not very good. Against Philly, he threw a lot of pretty passes in the first 3 quarters, but when it was money time, when it was time to go win the game, was it 27-all going to the 4th quarter? Again, QBR, scale of 0 to 100. Kirk Cousins in the 4th quarter had a 12. Nick Foles rose, Kirk Cousins fell. That was the story of that game, which was a big shootout and a big NFC East. It was a deciding kind of early season game in the NFC East, and the Redskins went south and the Eagles went north. So, in the end, is it time for the Colt McCoy era? I don't know. But Kirk Cousins he's a solid backup, because he's a nice young man who says all the right things. But as you so ably noted, the things he was saying were just honest. Like, I think in his heart of hearts, he does believe it's Robert's team. I'm just here trying to keep the seat warm, and hopefully we'll win a few games in his absence, and then I will hand the reins back to the man who deserves to have the reins in his hands.